Back again with some more free content. So, if you guys aren't aware, we have an Ableton Fundamentals program from myself, TWERL. So what this covers is basically everything from opening up Ableton for the first time through to like completing your first song from start to finish within a matter of weeks. The course actually has like 50 episodes, really in-depth stuff. And one of the things it includes is a full track breakdown of my song Nobody. It also includes a track from scratch, which I think I'm going to upload that as well. But if you are looking to get into production, or you're an intermediate and you want to learn more about Ableton, or you just want to switch over from another DAW to Ableton, I think this course would really benefit you. It also includes a 6-month free subscription to our daily feedback service, where we you can submit your songs to artists like Jaqui, Nightpunk, Oddmop, and so on, and get daily detailed feedback on your music, which is the quickest way to finish it. So with that being said, hope you guys enjoy, and yeah, this is my track, Nobody.
Welcome back. Right, so what we're going to be doing now is going over my track Nobody, right? So what I've included in the course folder is a full project file. So what this means is I'm giving you the full project file for one of my songs, Nobody, that was released last year. So we'll start off, we'll open it up. I'll give you a playthrough, and then we'll just start dissecting the track. I'm going to show you each individual layer, sort of how I came up with the song. And then at the end of that, you're going to have the project to open up yourself, and you can go in and see how I've made it, rearrange things, take the samples, whatever you choose to do. This project is exclusive to this pack. I've never done this before. No one does this. So let's get into it. So to open up the project, we simply just need to go into the secret project file folder. The exclusive project file, TWERL Nobody folder. We go in, as we do with any project file, we open it up there, and then we just click on the ALS, wait for it to load up. Cool. So it might say this. Mine says it because I don't have Ozone 6 anymore. It will probably say a few for you guys. It might say like you don't have a certain plugin like Alter Boy and all these other ones. All that means is basically you don't have that plugin installed. But I've frozen every single track, so it doesn't actually matter. And unless you unfreeze that track, but you can actually flatten it to audio anyway, as I've shown you how to do that before. Flatten MIDI to audio, or just flatten anything again. Right, so all you need to do is click OK, and it's going to open like so. And like I said, everything's frozen, so it doesn't actually matter if you have that plugin or not. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just play it through. I'll play with the artwork, and then just so you sort of get a better visual representation. I always try to send songs to labels and stuff with artwork, or like a base idea of what I want the artwork to be like, because combining that with the song, it actually, I've tried and errored this. Like if I send songs to a label with artwork, they seem to get placed better than songs that don't. It's because you can sort of piece the visual aspect with the art, and it sort of goes well together. So let's give this a play through, and then we'll go through and start dissecting it. Okay, so getting stuck into this, right? What I'm going to do is I'll go through each group and I'll show you what's involved. You've heard the track now, so I can go through each of these, show you everything that's going on, and then what I'll do is I'll show you my thought process behind actually making it. You know, like what I started with, what I did, and how I sort of went from there, and to get the sort of end product. So just going through, we'll start at the top. So you can see I've grouped everything here. This is a typical project folder. 50 tracks. It can be less, can be more. We'll have everyone does their grouping differently. Like some people will have drums, synth. Some people just have 2 groups and then have groups within the groups, because you can actually do groups within the groups like I have here. But yeah, some people do it differently. Some people just do like intro and drop, or like some people do melodic and drums. Like it's weird. But so what I've done here is I've got drums, I've got a drop group, I've got a synth group here. The drop group's got synths in it. I don't know why I did it like this. I think it's because of some of the processing I've got on the drop I didn't want inside any of the other groups. I could technically group these 2 together, but as long as I know what's going on, that's fine. I've got another synth group. I've got this synth group. So this synth group basically just applies to like the intro and the breakdown and stuff like that. I have a subgroup, which is like my bass, a vocal group. I have a group for fills, like fills in the drop and stuff like that, random fills, and then I have an effects group. Pretty standard, like what you'd see in any project folder. Got it all nice color coded, so it's easier to locate things. And I've put the markers up the top, just so you can at the locators, at the top, just so you can sort of see the process behind it. So we've got intro, build, drop, breakdown, build, drop, and then an outro. Right, so let's go through some of these groups. So we have drums up first, right? So let's run through this. So we start off with I've actually grouped these into 2 separate groups. So I have like the drop drums, then I have the build drums. So with the build drums, let's go through that one first. I've just used some loops and stuff like that, just layering different loops together. That's just like sitting there in the intro. So as that comes out, moves into the proper, this is all in the intro, it moves out to the build. I've got a washout on the master, so this is just like adding some reverb and stuff to everything in the project. So that's then obviously affecting the drums too. Cool, and that's just the build-up drums. Really, really simple. I think I've got them laid with a kick as well. Oh no, I don't. I've got that turned off. That's pretty much it for the build-up drums. Nothing too crazy going on. With the drop drums now, so we've got a couple of layers here. It's literally just a kick, snare, and a hat. So let's play through this. With the processing, I've got OTT on the drop. I don't really need that on there anymore. I don't use that. So I've got OTT. Remember I showed you guys OTT in audio effects. This is just the third-party one by Serum. It's the exact same as using this one, really. OTT there. So if you want to use that. So I'll show you the difference with and without. But yeah, so this is the drums. No processing going on that kick. Nothing going on the snare, really. Just some EQing and just a glue compressor to stop that clipping. If you use the glue compressor in Ableton, and you click this soft button, that's actually turning that into a soft limiter. You remember I showed you guys the limiter in audio effects? Basically just stopping my my snare from clipping, from going in the red. It actually gives it a nice sort of tone as well, like when it stops, when it squashes it down. With the hats here, unfreeze that. So with the hats here, nothing too crazy. I'm just EQing out the lows. I'm actually adding a vocoder to take away some harshness. Usually a vocoder is used on vocals, but I decided to experiment and use it on a hat in this one. You don't have to use effects what they're always normally used for. The way you get cool and exciting new results is by using effects on things that they're not actually supposed to be used on. So I've used this on the hat and it's actually taken away a lot of the harshness. So let's listen with and without. It's actually given it a different tone and taken away some harshness. So let's go with and without. it sits a lot better in that mix. And then I've just EQ'd some out again. I've got an auto pan here, which is basically panning it from left to right speaker very slowly, and it's barely noticeable. And then I'm also sidechaining it to the kick, just so every time it clashes with a kick, so you can see there, it ducks in volume slightly every time a kick comes in. I do this on my hats, usually just to give it a nice sort of flow. So let's listen with and without OTT. It's like boosting everything. It sounds sick. They sound a bit dull there. And then with, everything's nice and bright and sort of gelled together. And that's pretty much it. There's not a lot going on there really. I'll play it from, I'll sort of just play this loop here. Nothing too crazy going on. Now for sample selection, these are usually my go. Oh, let me just reactivate that frozen. There we go. Yeah, I usually use these samples a lot. The decap packs on Splice, drums that knock, they're called. Really, really good Flume type samples. These are all the samples that Flume uses in all of his songs, and that's a fact. So if you're looking for some good drums in this style, check him out. Decap, he's got about 8 packs on Splice. Really do recommend. That is pretty much it for the drums. Let's see what else we've got going on here, if we've got anything else. I'm pretty sure the build-up drums are the same again. Yeah, they are. Just a clap, and then build up again. And that's it for the drums. Really simple drums here, guys. Nothing crazy going on. No crazy processing, really. I usually do that with drums. I don't really add too much post-processing, just simply because the drums nowadays are just processed so well that you don't really need to add a whole lot of post-processing, I feel. So maybe just at most a little bit to gel them together. Like I've used OTT in this case. Maybe you could use the drum bus could work, or just a little bit of saturation would work as well, just to gel your drums together. Sometimes you don't need any processing at all. But yeah, so that's what I've done there. Now let's move on to the next section. Cool. So the next section we have is the drop section. Now, what I've done here is, the reason I've separated the two is because, like I mentioned, I kind of use some different processing and a lot of weird sidechaining and stuff going on here and a lot of automation. So I didn't really want that in the same group as the synth group. Just for my sort of mental game, it just made me work a little bit easier. Plus, I started with this drop idea, like what was going on here, before I added anything else. So I sort of just left that group as it was, then built around that. But I'll get to more of that later after I go through each group. I'll show you how I sort of work, how I sort of came up with the idea. But so what we've got here is a couple of things, right? So we have the vocal, the saw, and then just another saw thing again, I think. So the vocal here, this is just automating in slowly. Let's see if we can unfreeze this. So I'm just opening that with a filter there. And then when it comes in, so what it is this vocal here, need all you love, and it's like a guy singing that, and then I've just pitched it up on the drop here by using did I use Little Altar Boy? No, I didn't. So what I did there was I just pitched it up using just transposing it up on the audio sample itself. You can see that I've transposed it up 6 if I was to unfreeze that and put it back down. I just simply pitched it up like that. All right, so let's have a listen to this. You can hear there I've got a lot of automation and stuff going on, so you'll actually be able to see here. If I maybe down here, yeah, you'll be able to see. Keep an eye on all these little red dots. Or is it on the actual group itself? Yeah, it's on the group itself, sorry. So what I've got here is I've got a bunch of automations going on. What I'm doing here is when this vocal ends, I'm actually automating the dry wet of the reverb to come in, which is leaving some tail there. And that's why you're getting this big reverb space. And then I'm actually using a utility to turn that down every now and again so I can control the reverb. So for example, if this was off, the reverb would just carry on. But what I'm doing there is I'm letting the reverb carry out, and then I'm turning it down with the utility, which is just a volume knob, right? Because I've got it after the reverb. So the reverb comes in, and then when it gets to this, I'm turning it down so it sort of sounds like it just stops. And then slowly rises back in the volume. And I do that throughout the loop. So let's have a listen. This is just the volume automation. It's pretty cool, right? Like I'm just getting that I'm controlling how the movement goes. It would be the same as me sidetraining, right? But I've just got more control using this automation, right? I'm just automating the volume. Now, the reason I'm not automating the volume on the actual track itself is because if you do that and you want to adjust the volume level after that, and as soon as you move that volume level, it's going to delete your automation. So you kind of want to just I'll show you that right now. So if I automate this volume to do that sort of thing, right? And I like how that is. If I then go to move this, it's actually turned my automation gray, and now it's deleted my automation. To reactivate that, I have to do that. But if I want to change the volume level, it's not going to let me. So that's why I do all my volume automation in utility. So if you want to do that in future, drag your utility onto your audio track and do your automation with that, because then that way you can actually still mix your track as you go and that sort of thing, right? So yeah, this is the vocal. As for processing, it's like an EQ, a glue compressor. Let me just turn some of these off and I'll run you through. Whoops, not rename. Let's go unfreeze track. And what I'll do is I'll turn all these off. There's a little bit going on there. Turn all these off, and then I'll turn each one of them on one by one, and you can sort of see what the effect is actually doing, and I'll run you through it. Cool. So firstly, we have nothing. Let me actually turn these ones off as well. Cool, so that's it. So let's go and turn some of these on. So EQ to take some of the lows out so it doesn't clash with the bass. I've already taught you that. And then a glue compressor, just to compress the vocals a little bit. So what that's doing is compression is basically catching the loudest peaks and the lowest peaks, and it's compressing them so it's sort of flat and the volume stays the same throughout the whole sample. I've just done a little bit of compression there. It's barely noticeable, but when you're an engineer, you sort of pick up on these things. I've got a little bit of OTT going on there as well, just boosting some shit. And then I've got the reverb. That's just pushing it back in the mix a little bit. Then I've got this disharmonics preset. That's not too noticeable, but it's like a delay preset. So under the delay here, you can click disharmonics and you can get some really cool effects with that. I've got an EQ again because I'm adding so much reverb and noise with these other ones that I need an EQ again because it's created a lot more frequencies. Then I've got an auto filter, which is doing some automation. That's just before the drop. It's just automating it so it filters down and then comes back in. Got another reverb, which is doing some automation as well. That's just automating because it's wet here. Not doing a whole lot. The same with this. This is just doing minimal automation, just turning the volume down when it gets to the outro. And then I've got a de-esser. Now, this is a great tip for you guys. So a de-esser it's under the compressor, and if we drop that down and hit de-esser, what it's doing is when you hear things like all these harsh that sort of sounds that happens when you record, when you say your S's, it's really, really harsh because it's such a high frequency. It's like a hi-hat. You know what I mean? It's like a hi-hat. And what the de-esser does, it catches those harsh, loud peaks and it squashes them. So like... It just catches those loud peaks. So even if you have a synth or something that's really harsh and you can't get it to be clean, try drag a de-esser onto your sound and it'll actually clean it up a bit. It might make your sound a bit quiet, and all you have to do then is just add a compressor or just turn it up or something add a volume thing and turn it up or something like that. But yeah, that's basically it. What I'll do is I'll turn these back on. Cool. So then just on the processing on the drop, I've already showed you, but we've got the reverb automating in, and then we've got just some random little EQs, like I'm sweeping the reverb there. And that's basically it. Nothing too hectic going on for the rest of the song. When it gets that the vocal just repeats the same for the second drop. And then for the outro, all I've done is use the same vocal, but I've turned it down a little bit. And then also what I've done is I've added some more phrases. So this is like chopped up from a big loop, and I've just extended that loop so it's got more vocals in basically. That's basically it for the vocals, right? So then next we have the saw lead. Now let's listen to these together. Right, so the reason I've got these grouped is because I wanted that reverb to affect them both at the same time. And it just really gelled them, and like they've got this sort of movement about them, like they're getting sidechained at the same time. They've got the same sidechain, same sort of end processing going on. Just a lot of EQing going on here, really. Nothing too crazy, and some OTT to gel them together. But yeah, let me show you inside this one. So let's unfreeze that and go through some of the processing and stuff. Not a whole lot going on. So what we've got here is we have OTT, we have an EQ. We're not using that reverb. We're using a compressor, auto filter, and I'm using 2 DSs. Not sure why. Maybe it was just really harsh and I wanted to make it not so harsh. So cool. Yep, so let's go inside the patch. It's literally pretty much your stock standard initial patch in Serum. So what I've done is it's your standard saw wave. This one isn't even really doing anything, this oscillator. It's your standard saw wave with some distortion, some compression. Like I'm just using the multiband thing. And then after that, I've added some OTT. So let's go like play it from here. EQ'd some lows out. Compressor. Filter to filter this. And a de-esser just to clean it up. The processing doesn't really do it. It didn't really need too much processing. You can hear there that was very minimal. Everything that went on was really, yeah, it wasn't too crazy. It wasn't doing a whole lot to the sound. Pretty standard. With the MIDI, you can see here that I've used the key finder. I've used E major, and what I've done for pretty much everything is just drag that E major onto everything that needed MIDI. You can see I've done it here with the bass and stuff like that as well. E major. I've done it there with the Reese, E major. I've done that. So I've been using the key finder thing for quite a while, and that's sort of how I came up with this track. Right, so that's that. That's those two. They're gelling together really nicely. Let's listen with the drums. So this is the two we've gone over so far. Sounding pretty good. This next layer we've got here, what have we got here? That's literally just the same patch. I've just used it as like a plucky sound. It just goes sort of well with it. Just a little background thing. It's not really necessary at all. I've just got it in there. And that's it for the drop. That's pretty much it. It's the exact same in the second drop. I usually don't do this. I usually change the second drop slightly, but I just felt that this one was fine because it was more like poppy. So I kept that the same, and that's the drop and the drum so far done. Awesome, right, so moving now on to the synth group, right? So this synth group basically just covers everything that's not the drop in terms of synths and stuff. I've used a couple of loops, which is always, like I say, it's always fine to do. I've changed them a little bit, but they all just went really nicely together. So let's go over, firstly, we have this ARP loop, which is pretty prominent in the track. So I'm just using a bit of automation here. I'm automating some reverb and the auto filter and the volume and stuff like that. I've got it EQ'd pretty heavily, as you can see. Let's turn some of these effects off. Yep, so let's hear it without the without the EQ. Just way too dominant for what I needed. I didn't need that much of it, so that sort of did it for me. I start off with some reverb as it like starts in the intro, so it's really spacey. And then what I'm doing is I'm automating the dry wet down so it goes dry when it hits that build that like halfway through the intro section. So let's go back to it. Cool, and it pretty much just ends there. Next, underneath that, we have this Reese bass. So what's going on with the bass is, let me show you this. So I'll unfreeze that. So what I'm doing with this one, it looks like there's a lot of processing going on, but there's not actually a whole lot going on. None of this stuff really needs to be there. So firstly, I've got an EQ. That EQ is just doing some random little opening and closing. It's almost acting as like a filter. I've got some reverb automation, which is at the end of every section. Not sure why I've got that saturated doing that. And then I've got some volume automation as well. And just some more EQ, some more reverb, some more saturation. And this redux thing gets automated in towards the end, so it goes. Don't ask me why I did that. I couldn't tell you. Right, let's get into the patch. It is pretty much just your stock standard. It's the same thing. It's like pretty much the same as that saw patch from the drop. I've just pitched it down a lot and just had it playing it like a bass note. And what I'm doing here as well is I'm using this LFO on the volume. So without this LFO, it would just be your standard Reese bass. But what I'm doing there is I'm actually using that LFO to make it like a pluck. That's just making the volume knob go dot, 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 dot. So it's like a pluck, right? It's just one sustained note, one long note doing that. Dum, 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 dum. And I use the major E major key finder, and that just allowed me to write a really, really quick bass line. And the same with on the drop. It allowed me to write a really, really catchy like melody without many fuck ups, just because I couldn't really hit a wrong note. So I actually got to properly experiment as though I knew music theory for years. That's basically what this key finder thing is doing for you. It's crazy. So there, that just carries on with some random automations going throughout. Nothing really crazy going on with this bass. So we'll just open here. Just towards the end of every section, just a little like tension. Little things all on top of each other, like all these little intricate things together really adds some like energy and I guess like a bit of a vibe to the track. All these little things do add up, and it really does make an effect on the listener, because if I didn't have those things, it would just sort of lack, I guess, energy, and like it wouldn't really suck you in as much as it does without these little things. They sort of catch your attention subconsciously without you knowing, and they do make a difference in the end. So that's that. Next, so laid on top of each other, they sound like this. Let's solo the group. They gel really, really nicely together. And I've just looped that at the end, just moving on to the next section, because what I do here in the build, I actually let go of that loop. I leave it. I only use it in the intro. So what I do is I kind of replace it with the vocal that's filling that high frequency range. Cool. So next we're moving on to this little loop here I've got. This is just an Oshi loop, and what I've done here is I've EQ'd a lot of it out. So it's this similar thing I do with the crane loop. This one I've oh yeah, and with that crane loop as well, I pitched it down a lot. Originally it sounded like this. Let me just show you that. Unfreeze. No reason in particular. I just think it sounded better lower, and it worked with my track. So what happened there? Unfreeze. Let's go with this one maybe. Sounds pretty good actually. Hey, I actually kind of want to use that like that in another track. Make some hyper pop or some shit. So yeah, back to this flute. So we got this flute and there's really not a whole lot going on. Let's unfreeze that. Without the EQ. Ignore the crackle. That's simply because I'm my CPU is going pretty crazy right now, just because I'm recording and I'm running Ableton this full session, so my CPU is struggling a bit. So if you ever hear that crackle, just ignore that. So what that's doing there is it's adding like a background layer, just sits in the background. You can barely hear it, but you can sort of fit without it. It sounded weird. Yeah, and that's it for the synth section. So they're all layering on top of each other. Now with the drums, let's solo those two. You can hear it in there. Cool. And what I've done here is basically I've taken a snippet from the saw lead here, and I've recorded it. So I showed you how to record onto an audio track. So I've just re-recorded that MIDI. Oh, sorry, that synth patch. And I've yeah, so I re-recorded that synth patch and I've just reversed it and added some effects. So it's sort of like it's teasing the drop. It's teasing the synth that's going to be in the drop, and it's sort of pulling you in. It's sucking you in. It's almost like a riser almost. So I've just used that. So with them together. And it just goes in like that. Cool, so that's pretty much it. Now let's move on to the breakdown. Now I'm using the same saw loop again. So the lead loop again. The only thing that changes here is rather than having this bass here, the build bass, I actually switched to a Reese bass. Actually, no, I switch a couple of things up here. So what I do is I use a new lead. So what I do is I've copied this and I've pasted it on there, and I've actually messed around with the melody a little bit, and I've used a new lead. So let's unfreeze that. So that's pretty much just the same lead again that's used. It is the exact same, but all I've done is I just added fucking heaps of reverb. So it's pretty much the exact same sound, just with like a little LFO on the filter. And then I've added a lot of reverb, and what that's done is just like made it spacey. So without it. And then with reverb. Just sits in there really nice with that reverb. Cool, so that's that. And then another thing I've added in this breakdown is, rather than having that plucky bass that we had in the intro, right? This, dung, 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 dung. I've used the same bass note, so I've copied and pasted the MIDI, pasted it onto a new synth track, and I've used Serum. You'll notice I use Serum a lot for this sort of stuff, so unfreeze track. All I've done is used a Reese bass. So what that is it is your initial patch on Serum, and then I've just added some unison, some detune, and then there's no effects on. That's all it is, just with some glide. I remember you showed you the glide and the porter knob, and that's all it's doing. So I've got... So they're gliding on top of each other. You can see I'm just extending the notes slightly over where they should be. And that was just that sort of change. You notice how you remember how I said that you need to sort of change something up in the breakdown? Like it can be very similar to your intro and your verse, or whatever. But something sort of needs to change. And for me, that was like, I didn't want to change anything too hectic, that it was like too noticeable, sorry. So what I did was I basically just used the same bass and switched to a new synth preset. And that's something I actually suggested to you guys when we did song structure and stuff. I said, with the breakdown, all you need to do sometimes is just copy and paste your MIDI onto a new synth preset, and that's that little change you need, right? So that's all I've done. So I've just done the same thing there, copied and pasted, added a new sort of lead thing. And it just goes like that, right? Cool. Nothing else really changes here. It looks like I've got something else new here. What have I got? What I've done here is I've actually recorded I've frozen this and I've flattened it to audio just so I can actually pitch it up a little bit better. So you remember how I said that things always pitch up better in audio than they do in reverb? Than they do in MIDI. In Ableton, rather than pitching in a MIDI clip, it's better to do it in audio. You get a nice clean pitch up. So that's what I've done here. I'm pitching up my Reese bass so it like rises with the build. So let's play that in context. Just like nice and smooth. It's getting rid of that Reese. Just got some EQing going on there, automating in then as well. And that is it for the synth group. Nothing else crazy happens. I'm using that Reese again in the outro. That's it. Cool. So we've gone over drop, drums, and the synth group so far. Let's move on to the subgroup. Right. So with this subgroup, I've used a sample. I've used Simpler. Remember Simpler? And I've used a sample there. And I've also got a sub fill here, which is a sample too. So what I've done is I've grabbed a sub and dropped it in Simpler. I've got a bit of processing, not really much, just a little bit of saturation. I've made the bass mono, so it means it's in the dead center. There's no like side signal for that. And the sub fill is standard. There's no effects on that. So let's have a listen. Cool. All right, let's go into this one. I remember that I haven't touched this project in a long time. So yeah, basically got the I've got the sub going here with a little bit of glide on some of the notes. Let's take off some of these processing. Cool. Put it back on. Doesn't really do a whole lot. With this sub fill here, turn that freeze back on. With the sub fill, we've got no processing. I think I pitched it. Yeah, I just pitched some around. So originally it was. Let's turn warp off. Listen to the original sample. Maybe it was longer that way. Yep, so I heard that and I was instantly like, I can do something with that. And I did. So it just worked really good as like a little fill. That's pretty much it for the sub. So let's listen to that in context with the drums. That's where you got that glide there. And they just sort of gel together, right? Cool. Let's listen in context with the drop synths as well. It's still cutting through really nice. That's because I've EQ'd the lows out of everything in that drop. Remember, I EQ'd the lows out of pretty much everything, right? So the synth and the vocal and other things like the hat and stuff, and everything's just like sitting really nice on top of each other. gluing really nice. Same again for the second drop. I told you I kept the drops the same. And that's it for the subgroup. There's no processing going on in the actual group as well. There's no processing going on in the synth group either. Cool. Let's move on to this vocal group. Now, the vocal group, there's a lot of random little vocal fills that I've got going on throughout the track. And yeah, don't ask me what the thought process behind what this was, like why I use which sample. The reasoning behind it was things sounded empty. Like things sounded empty in the track, and all I did was I just kept cycling through Splice and picking random vocal samples, trying different ones with different effects. It was just honestly just trial and error. I would have had a lot more samples in than this. Like I would have tried like triple the samples that are in here, but not everything worked, and I kept the ones that did work, and I just went with it, right? So let's play some of these out. So I've got a lot going on here. Pretty much the processing that will be going on is either just pretty much just EQ and reverb. You can see here I've got some EQ going on, some automating some EQ in there to start off the intro and like sort of smooth things in. I've got some more mid-side EQ, some filtering going on here. I'm opening the filter, side chaining to the kick and snare, that sort of thing. So these vocals are scattered throughout the intro and the drop. So let's go through some of these now. I'll play the group first. And the filter opens up all the way there, and you can hear the vocals in their full. And that's pretty much it. So that's for the intro anyway. So you can see that apart from these two, everything's from different packs. There was no like I said, no real thought process going behind it. I was just dragging on little samples, selecting portions from different samples and seeing what worked, and just pitching them around. You can see pretty much everything here will be pitched. I just pitched them around until they sounded well together. It sounded like it was in key. You can tell if something's not in key. I'll show you right now. If I have this unfroze that, and then I go to this section here, say right. If I solo that with this synth group, let's turn this up so you can hear it. If I had this at its original pitch, you can tell straight away that just doesn't work, right? Something needs to change. So what I'll do is I'll go. So I actually could have done this. Actually, no, I couldn't. Yeah, you can just tell. And then when you get to a certain one, you're like, and you're like, fuck, all right, that's the one. That one works. Let's get that back to normal. I can show you the same with this one as well. Let's do that one as well. Unfreeze. Let's get that back to normal and turn this one up. Doesn't really work. That one works. 2 works. That, certain pitches, you can have a few different pitches that will work with your song. Like I could have that, for example. So I could have this one and then have this one pitch up. Yeah, they kind of work, kind of don't. But you get the point. That still wasn't even the right pitch. That was actually down to 4. And you can sort of hear, you're like, okay, that one kind of works, right? So that's the sort of process behind getting vocals to fit that are different pitches and shit like that. You basically just drag it in. It's probably not going to sound good straight away. It will sound like it's out of key, but you just basically transpose up and down until it fits. And I did that with all these vocals, trial and error, and I decided that these ones are the ones that fit. Some of them, if I felt that they were too dry and they were standing out too much, I'd just add some reverb. You can see I've added reverb to most of these. Some of them not. Some of them already had reverb on, so I didn't, but things like that, right? So that's pretty much it for the build up, the intro and build, sorry. So let's move on to the drop chops now. I'm pretty sure I've reused most of the ones from the intro or things like that, I think. Now, obviously, we have that main drop one, that Be Weird, no. Now, the reason I've added some more in the drop is just to sort of complement that and play samples in the down points of that vocal, like when that vocal stops. I'm sort of gelling these two together. I was going to tell you how I'd make the song after I'd done this, but I'm sort of telling you along the way. So yeah, it's sort of playing on its down points. Like every time that vocal stops and has a silent point, I sort of slam another vocal chop in there. Even though it's not from the same pack or it's in no way related, they sort of just work together because I pitched them. So we got... a lot going on. Pitch that one up there. What do we got here? Yeah, it's pretty much it. A bunch of... What do we got here? I like that one. Oh, I've not even EQ'd that. Oh, no, I've got an EQ on the group. It's okay. Yeah, cool. So we got all together. A lot going on. Cool. Let's play that with the drop vocal so you can see how it plays on its down points. They just bounce off each other. It's like boom, 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 and then you combine that with the drums. Everything's bouncing off each other. Then I add in that synth lead. Sorry, I didn't have that soloed. Get those drums back on. Let's get that group on. Let's add in that sub. Layers and layers and layers until everything sounds full and there's sort of no gaps or anything missing. You feel as though it's full and it's at its it's at its max, I guess. Now that's pretty much it. When we get to the breakdown, it's pretty much just the same samples again from the intro. Well, it is. It's not pretty much. It is. And the drops continues the same. And then in the outro, I use some of those samples again. So let's solo that. Cool, and that's pretty much it for the vocal group. We have the fills group next. So this is what fills are. They basically can be any random sound. Just sort of the same way I use those vocals. They were like vocal fills. I kind of just use them to fill up spots in the drop or not in the intro as well, where there's like a gap, and you can really get creative with your fills. You can use like completely random sounds that you wouldn't normally use. So things like this, which would never get used in a drop. Like that sort of shit, right? They're just like random little fills, and I do the same in the intro here. I've layered a few things. And I've layered that with like, not that one, sorry. Back to, where is it? Is it this one here? Yeah. I actually like mashed a few sounds together to get this one. It's not in there anymore, but I layered a few things. So to start off, we've got, I don't know why this is in the fills one, but this is basically just the vocal from the drop, but I've used it in the intro just to like fade the whole track in. So the track actually starts like this. So that's just a chop from that vocal drop chop. and I've just added some effects, and I've actually time stretched it. I've grabbed it and I've gone like double time, and it's just stretching it. Starts like that, right? Moving on to here, we've got this fill, which sort of like breaks up the intro and the build. Like really Flume type fills. I was trying to get creative. I was really inspired by Flume's new mixtape at the time, because I made this song. I released this song like mid 2020, and then I made it at the end of 2019. So it took me a while to get this one out, because I was just trying to find the right home for it. It was originally going to be in my EP along with Killers and Space Rave, but no label would take them as a whole, because I tried to do something different. I tried to go like one song like this, like a future bass, future weird song, like wavy song. I tried to do a house song, which was Killers, and then I tried to do a hard trap song, which is Space Rave with Advance, which is coming out later this year on Bass Rush, the guys who do EDC and stuff. Yeah, like I loved them. I was really proud of that body of work, but no label would take it as a whole, which was really disappointing. They were like, "Oh, we want these two, but not this one. Or we want this one, but not the other two." And I was like, "Fuck, like no, like I'm not giving you one," which is a shame, because I ended up doing that. I had to, like, no one would take it, and I was really fed up, and I was sort of putting myself down because no one would take it. But it wasn't. I came to realize that it's nothing on me. Like, they were actually great songs, and I still think they're great songs. But what it was labels just, they have a certain thing that they want, and if they're not going to sacrifice their fan base and everything just for the sake of keeping me happy, and if it wasn't going to suit them, it wasn't going to suit them. They're just being honest, right? They did say they liked them, but it just wasn't the right place for them. So what we did, we just released them one by one, and they all did well. So I was still yet to release Space Ray, but we found the right home for that as well. Everything worked out for the best. Like, that's coming out on Bass Rush, which means I'll probably get some ties in EDC next year or whenever this shit's normal. So everything works out for the best. Anyway, so yeah, that's the build fill, and I used some fills in the drop, like mentioned. So we've got like I'm not actually using that one. Oh, I thought I was. The trash one. That's just a little random fill that sits on top of the sub. Not a whole lot going on my fills group. Usually I will use a lot of fills. I get really creative with my fills. I just haven't really in this one. That's how it be sometimes. Lastly, we have our effects group. Now, this is just pretty stock standard group. We've just got sweeps and rises and stuff like that. So just going through heaps of random packs on Splice, just finding down sweeps and stuff. Rises. I've used really clean, like white noisy type stuff for this one, just so it's smoother. A lot of effects here. Yeah, just little things, because without it, like, it just doesn't really. Let's listen without. It doesn't have as much sweep, but then with. Adds that little layer that you need. So yeah, you really got to layer your effects. Use as many effects as you want. In the drop, it appears I've used something as well. Let's see what I've used here. I've used a little rise, sorry. You can use them in your drop as well to lead one section to the other. I do that a lot. Like you can see here. So just sweeping from the drop to the breakdown there. Without that, let's have a listen. See the difference it makes. And then with. Add that vibe, right? The only thing that changes in the second build up is I've just added another like riser, just so it sort of separated the first build and the second build. It just had that extra layer. Use these two risers. Just the only effects I'm really using on these, this effects group is basically just EQ and some reverb and some stuff just to smooth it out. separates the two because I don't have that in the first build up. And that's pretty much it. Just the same thing again on the drop and then the outro. That's it. Now that is it for everything that's going on in this project. Now I just want to talk a little bit on how I came up with the idea. I've sort of gone through my whole thought process throughout the whole explaining everything in the groups. But the way the idea came about was I was just messing around with... First, it was actually this. So originally I had this. It was this loop here. It wasn't that first bit. It was... And that was without any effects. So if I bring this out of the group and freeze it and take some shit off, you'll be able to hear what I originally started with. So unfreeze. And that was all I had. From there, I was like, all right, what do we need here? And I just added some drums just to get a groove going. I always work in a loop like this. And then I'll keep adding layers and layers until it starts sounding full and full. And then what I do is I work backwards and I write like the same way I showed you in the structuring exercise, how you can just take that one little drop idea and turn that into a full song, right? So yeah, what I do is I work in a loop like this and I'll just keep adding layers and layers until this little loop sounds full. And then I'll use that same technique that I used when I showed you guys how to structure. And then I've got a track like structured out and I'll just keep adding layers from that. So yeah, we have... Then I was like, it needs something else, and that's when I started experimenting with vocals. So I started messing around with this. So let's actually pull this one out as well, so we don't have the processing. They were sort of gelling together, and then from there I kind of just went like, all right, well, it needs something else here, and that something else was the automation and stuff. Then I was like, all right, it needs some more movement, and they need to flow better. So that's when I started adding things like, I started adding reverb and automating that in, then I was automating in like the filter and things like that, and that sort of just like gave it that like gel that it needed. So like now we have... all that filter movement and stuff. It just gave it that bounce, gelled it all together, and that was pretty much it. From there, I was like, okay, it obviously needs a bass, so then that's when I laid in the sub. So I went through the same process, just like making sure I just started with a MIDI clip and then just started adding in notes until I filled in the gaps, basically. I didn't have that to start off. Then I was like, it needs another layer in that sub, so that's when I started experimenting with fills, sub fills, and then that's when I came up with this. So all you're doing is trying to add layers and layers and layers and different spots and fill up every section until one, it flows well, and two, it's sounding full. And that was the goal here, and that's what I was slowly coming towards. And lastly, I was like, it just needs that, like, it's sounding pretty good, but it just needs that last little, like, whatever is going to get it over the line. And that for me was experimenting with the vocal fills. So then that's when I came up with this. Just filling in every gap. And that was it. And then that's pretty much it. Now from there, I just like duplicated it I literally just duplicated the drop. All I did was I took out the drums from this first section. So rather than have it go, I took the drums out for this first section. Brought them back in. So I was like, you know. Back in as normal, so listen to that in context. So we had, so rather than that, I'd had the drums out. and just blending like that. And that was the different. That was the only way I separated the first section of the drop to the second. Just gave it that little bit of difference, and that was the drop done. Now, what I did from there was I just wrote backwards. So I just copied and pasted some things like. I copied and pasted the MIDI from that synth lead, and I just like started experimenting with the bass line and some of the vocal stuff there. So I just had like. Originally, I just had the bass line. I didn't have any of these two. I just had. I came up with that from like that melody that I had. So remember, you're trying to reuse everything you've got. So I reused this, and I came up with this bass line. So then I copied and pasted that to the intro, and just like changed the notes a little bit. Then I was like, okay, this obviously needs something else as well. So I used this. I came up with this random little, these two random samples. And then they just gelled together. From then I just added some drums. And then I used the same vocals that I used here and just used them in different spots. So then I'm reusing the same stuff. And then for the build up, they're really simple drums. I reused some of the drums from the drop. And then I had the same vocal from the drop as well. You're trying to reuse everything that you've used in the drop in certain ways, so that when the drop comes, because you've used some of those items in the intro, but like and the intro and the build, it's referencing the drop the whole time. So when the drop comes in, it doesn't sound foreign. It sounds like you've already heard it before, because you're listening to these things and you're like, your brain automatically thinks that it's familiar because you've heard it in the intro. And even though I've used it at different pitches and stuff like that, it still thinks that it's similar. And that's pretty much it. So once you've got that intro and build down, it was really, really easy to get this one going because I reused stuff from the drop. And I actually used a reference track as well. I do that a lot. So I drag up a reference track the same way I showed you guys how to do it in the structuring exercise. I can't remember what song I used, but I just used that to reference the structure and some of the layering they use for their builds and stuff like that. I was like, okay, so he's using like a clap build there and a snare thing there and like a kick there, and he's using rises there. So I just copied that process. I was like, all right, so I'll put some claps in here, not the same patterns and stuff, but you're getting ideas from other people. I did that, and then once I had the first half of the song done, the song was pretty much finished. All I did was copy and paste that, so duplicated that over. I changed some things in the breakdown. I left the second drop the same. I added a few extra things in the second build up, and then I was up to the outro. And now the outro, I just copied and pasted. I copied and pasted the respace from here, and then I copied and pasted the drop vocal, and then copied and pasted some more of these vocals, and that was it. I'm reusing everything again. Like that outro took me about 5 minutes to make. And then we're at. It's a stripped back version of everything else in the song. It's saying like this is the end of the story, like I've already taught you guys how to do in structuring. Boom, and that is it. From there, that's pretty much how I wrote the song. In terms of mixing, I mix as I go. So basically, if something's too loud, I'll turn it down. If something's messy, I'll add some EQing and stuff. And I do that. And at the end, I'll have a listen. And if anything needs changing, I'll just turn some stuff up. Or I might use some reverb on some things or EQing and that sort of thing. I just do that as I go. You can see all the effects I had when I broke down each track. I just do that as I go. And at the end, I just put on this master chain. So I've actually given you guys this master chain in the bonus folder. So let's listen to with and without. I actually usually mix into a chain. So not everyone does this. Some people like to turn this on at the end of their song. But what I do is once I've got my little main idea going, so when I've got like the drums and that, for example, for the drums, the synth and that vocal thing going in the drop and drums group, I actually turn my master chain on then and I start mixing into the chain. I just prefer to do it that way. But yeah, so let's listen to with and without the chain. It makes a big difference to the mix. So without, and then with. Big difference to dynamics and everything there, hey. So that's why I like to do it straight into it, so I know what the end result's going to sound like, rather than just turning it on at the end, because then you're going to have to turn stuff down anyway because you've added all this extra volume and stuff. So that's just sort of how I work. So you can choose to do the same. I do suggest doing it that way, but whatever works for you. Anyway, I've included 4 of these in the bonus folder. 4 or 5 of these master chains. Not everyone will work. Some use third 30. Some use third-party plugins and stuff like that, but I've made sure that this one is all Ableton stuff for you guys. So everything is stock, and you don't have to have any third-party plugins to use this. And that is it. That is my song, Nobody. I hope you enjoyed the breakdown. And from here, if you want to, feel free to open it up, dissect it yourself, use some of the samples and stuff. You might be able to go in and you'll understand my thought process. And feel free to use anything from this. I really don't give a fuck because the song's already out. Doesn't bother me. So yeah, have fun with that. And next up, I suggest you watch the track from start to finish. That's where you'll actually get to see me live in the flesh going through my thought process and how I actually do make a song. And then I'll go a bit more in depth into mix and mastering. And then that'll be the last one for the course.